Welcome. So before we do the regular class on Tanakh, thought we would cover a topic. Since this is the week of we're going to have Purim, and at the same time we have the Persian enemy of the Jewish people is just defeated today. So therefore, it's a good idea to discuss the difference between the Jewish people, Israel, and uh, non-Jewish people, so that there could be an understanding. What's the difference between Israel and non-Israel? This also affects Bnei Noach, because, for example, if a Ben Noach wants to be a Ger Toshav, and settle the Holy Land and do more mitzvahs than a regular Ben Noach, so what is this spiritual foundation of Israel that makes it different from every other nation? Okay, so there are three unique character traits of the Jewish people. This is a Gemara on page 79 in Yevamos. Page 79 in Yevamos. In the art scroll, that would be Yevamos volume 2. So the fascinating case of the Gibeonites. So the Gibeonites, there are three major events that are recorded in Tanakh about the Gibeonites. First, in the book of Joshua, the Gibeonites, they are found to be they try to deceive their way into becoming being accepted into the Jewish people. So since they came with deception, so they were not allowed to convert to Judaism. And Joshua would punish them with being water carriers for the temple and the tabernacle. So that was in the book of Joshua. Then in the book of Samuel, so when King Saul destroyed the village of Nov, so seven Gibeonites were killed. At that time, they were called the Nesinim. So therefore, King David would order the execution of seven descendants of King Saul to kind of remove the rage of the Gibeonites. Now, the fascinating and scary part of this is that the Gibeonites were enraged for 30 years. And King David, when he became older, he wanted to stop their anger because it's unhealthy for a whole community of Ger Toshuvim to have rage against Israel if they're trying to live with them and do mitzvahs together. So this is a couple hundred years after the book of Joshua. So King David executed the seven descendants, those seven descendants of Saul. They're listed, but that part of we don't have to go into it tonight. But so anyway, even after they punished the descendants of Saul, the Gibeonites were still enraged. So this justified, completely, of course, and the wisdom and the plan by Joshua to not accept them as converts to Judaism, because even after there was justice, they wanted to go overboard and like revenge. So, and that kind of level of revenge is not a Jewish trait. So, but later on, okay, so that is a couple hundred years after Joshua. Later on, about 1,000 years after Joshua, the Gibeonites returned joyfully with the children of Israel in the time of Ezra to resettle the Holy Land for the Second Temple, and they voluntarily joined Israel, eager to become water carriers to serve in God's temple. So they had transitioned from a deceptive nation that was had cruel underlings to a nation that was humble and eager to be grateful to God. So in other words, the Gibeonites effectively became the most successful nation of Geratoshav in history. So now there's two observations. One, first of all, it was good they weren't accepted as Jews if they were not willing to accept the Torah principles of forgiveness. Two, look at God's patience. A people of deception and vengefulness. God was willing to wait 1,000 years for them to have a chance to become the righteous people God knew they could be, and the opportunity was afforded them, and that's what happened. So what began as, you know, people trying to find a loophole, and it became an incredible success story. But it's all because of God's mercy, right? So when you have that level of mercy, so therefore the Mamlechas Kohanim, kingdom of priests, must also have mercy. So this is discussed. Let's see, it's the last 5 Aramaic words on 78b, and then the first paragraph of 78, the 79a in the Gemara Yevamos. Okay. So starting the last 5 words in Aramaic and Hebrew on page 78b5 in the Art Scroll. Amar David Shaul Nafkulahu. Continuing on 79a1. Teresar Yarche Shata. Bo Darkea Lamis Pedeha. David said, Saul, 12 months of the year have already elapsed since Saul's death, and it's no longer fitting to eulogize him. And if you look in the commentary, this is actually 30 years later. So it's we're no longer in the first year of mourning, so therefore we can't eulogize him. But in other words, so David wanted to make up for the claim of the Gibeonites, and remove their rage. Nick near Karinhu una Faisinhu. Let us call them and appease them. So we see, remember, the Gibeonites were the nation known as those who tried to deceive, God's people, right? And 30 years after the event, King David still was diligent to try to bring justice from their perspective. You understand? So we see the humility of King David and his dedication to true justice for all citizens, whether or not they were born Jewish, whether or not they clung to Israel in a pure way. But remember, the byproduct of the Gibeonites' effort did let them leave behind human sacrifice. So there was a spiritual foundation for the greatness they rose to in the time of Ezra. Thanks for saying hello, Abba. Okay, we have just a chat. Okay. Ma'aseh lachem uvama achaper. And David called Vayikra Hamelech lagivonim vayomer alehem. And David called to the Gibeonites and he said to them, what can I do for you, and with what can I atone for this sin, so that you will bless the heritage of Hashem? V'imru lo hagivonim, ein lanu kesef zav im Shaul v'im beso. And the Gibeonites said to him, we have no claim for silver or gold against Saul, nor against his house. Nor do we seek a man, etc., to kill amongst the Israelites. Yutan lanu shiva anashim ibanav vo ka'an num la'Hashem v'gomer. But let the 7 men of his sons be given to us, and we will hang them for the sake of Hashem, etc. Mipais v'lom paisinhu. David attempted to appease them, but he could not appease them. Amar shalosha simanim yesh be'umazu. King David said the following about the Jewish people. So here's a secret about the spiritual foundation of the Jewish people that made them appropriate to be the Mamlechas Kohanim, kingdom of priests. Amar Shlosha Simanim Yesh B'Umazu. There are 3 identifying marks of this nation. Harachamanim v'habaishanin v'gom lechasadim. They are merciful, bashful, and they do acts of kindness. Merciful, bashful, and they do acts of kindness. Rachamanim dichsiv, they are merciful, as is written, v'nasan lecha rachamim v'richamacha v'hirbacha. And he will give you mercy and make you merciful, and he will multiply you. God will give you mercy, and he will make you merciful, and he will multiply you. So when you, Israel, become merciful, then God will bless you. You understand? So part of the troubles Israel went through was to become more and more merciful. By Shanim, bashful is written, Ba'avor tihia yiraso al penechem. That is, all will be upon your faces. So in other words, they don't like to do immorality in public, as an example. That's an example of being bashful. So if somebody's rejoicing in immorality in public, they're acting in a way that's not associated with Israel. So you understand? So if somebody's a Ben Noach in Timbuktu by themselves as a hermit, that's different than somebody who wants to move to Israel and join Israel. So join Israel, again, these 3 traits are vital to fit in with the spiritual nature of Israel. Merciful, bashful, and they do acts of kindness. Now, the previous verse, he will give you mercy and make you merciful, and he will multiply you, implies that Israel's mercy was sometimes imposed on them. God made them merciful, not that they're automatic superhuman beings. God formed Israel with certain troubles to make them more with these 3 traits. Therefore, Israel is able to cling to God, and that's why there's so many prophets of humanity come from Israel, because they have these 3 traits. So therefore, somebody who wants to come close to God through Israel has to be in sync with these 3 traits. Gomle Chasadim, they do acts of kindness, is written, Laman Asher Yitzava Espanav Vespeso, because he, Abraham, commands his children and household. Koshishbo Shlosha Simanim Halalu. Whoever has these 3 identifying marks of good character traits, Ro'oi Lehidavek Bumazu, is worthy to cleave to this nation of Israel. And our scroll adds in the comments that this should be, in other words, you could intermarry into Israel even if you have these 3 traits. That's how much you could combine with Israel. But in other words, if you're lacking these 3 traits, you got to work on yourself before you consider really converting. Otherwise, you can't expect to have such success. So we see we see how God formed Israel to be even more merciful, and we see even the Gibeonites, after 1,000 years of sharing exile in Babylon with Israel, there were many of them who joined Israel willingly, voluntarily, to become water carriers in the temple. It's like I said in class before, who wouldn't volunteer to carry some water in the temple nowadays, right? What a what an honor. So they went from being the Gibeonites went from being punished to being honored. Uh, in their own eyes, they felt they were more esteemed because they were serving in the temple. You understand? So that is a sign of what? Of humility, right? And when they wanted to bring water to the priests, which is an act of kindness. And what did they do? They joined Israel, and they didn't bring up the sins of Saul. So they're bashful as well. You understand? So all the three traits of Israel could be seen in the Gibeonites, even though they never converted to Judaism, even though they remained Ger Toshav. Do you understand? So even to be the best Ger Toshav you could be, it's important to remember these three traits. This is Yevamos 79a. Merciful, bashful, and performing acts of kindness. Any questions on this point before we go to the next class? Any questions? Okay, so thank God, Baruch Hashem. So it's very important to understand. So, and we see this is the very opposite with the enemies of Israel. You know, like when we're going to read the Megillah Esther, right, and see how King Achashverosh tried to make his wife come out naked in front of his guests, right? So that's the opposite of bashful, right? And he was, you know, he was prone to violence and etc. So this is the essence really of the spiritual difference between Israel and the enemies of Israel. So it's important to keep this in mind, whether you want to convert to Judaism, whether you want to be a Ger Toshav, or whether you just want to be a good Jew. These three character traits are vital. Gemara of Yevamos 79a. All right. Thank you for learning with me. Let's pause here.